Another challenging situation you can get into with regards to making an Alzheimer's disease diagnosis is that there are times when the patient is not the person who brought the chief complaint. So a daughter or a spouse might have tipped you off or come right out and said that their loved one was having trouble with memory loss or some other cognitive function, and that led to your diagnostic evaluation. So then the challenge becomes how to disclose this diagnosis when the patient themselves didn't really have the complaint. There are situations when I will first talk to the caregiver who brought the complaint forward and explain to them my findings and my concern about the likely diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. And after having that conversation, talk with them about how to move forward and talk to the patient. Very often they'll have a good feeling for where their loved one's at on the ability to handle that information. Now, if you're a primary care provider and have a long-standing relationship with the patient, you may have some really good instincts too to add to this part of the challenging conversation that you need to have, and you may be pretty well prepared to know how to handle the conversation. And thanks for coming in today. I know it can be worrisome to have your mom show symptoms of memory trouble. And thanks also, you completed that survey earlier for us, the AD8. And on that survey, it talks a little bit about what kind of change you've seen in your mom. So I know that you've been noticing change. And as we get older, we all do have a certain amount of change in our thinking. The universal change we all experience is that we can slow down, but we really should be able to keep our thinking at about the same level as we had as adults into our later years. So the fact that your mom's had some change does lead me to be concerned. We also did the memory testing, and we've talked a little bit about the fact that the score that she achieved on that memory assessment was below where it really should be for someone of her age and educational level. So putting all that together, I'm really concerned that your mom's showing symptoms of dementia. And what I wanted to do is talk to you a little bit today about what dementia is and what kind of concerns I have that make me think we need to do some further testing. One of the things I brought is a way of understanding that dementia is really a broad term, or an umbrella term, as they say, that really covers any time someone has a cognitive change that is worse than they had been throughout their adult life. It's slowly come upon them, didn't happen overnight, and it's also created an ability on their part to function independently like they used to. So that's really the diagnosis of dementia. Now, when we talk about dementia, it's important to understand that dementia is the umbrella term, and there are different diseases that can cause dementia. So things like Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common cause of dementia, that's one of the diseases that can create that syndrome that we see in the form of memory loss, trouble functioning. Vascular dementia is a term we use when someone's had poor circulation or mini strokes that have contributed to the same type of symptoms but coming from a different disease. And the rest of this handout details the different kinds of disorders that can contribute to dementia. Okay? Now, the next thing I want to sort of point out to you is that when we talk about dementias, and in this case we're going to talk specifically about Alzheimer's disease. So Alzheimer's disease being one of the types of dementia, one of the important things to understand about Alzheimer's disease is that it starts in a certain part of the brain called the hippocampus. And on this graphic you can see it located there. But unfortunately, this disease doesn't remain in the hippocampus. So the function of the hippocampus is, I usually talk about it as kind of Grand Central Station. It's a processing center for all the different things we hear, we see, things we touch. The information coming into our brains gets processed at the hippocampus. When that center is not working well, you're not able to make new memories. So one of the things about Alzheimer's disease that's important to understand is that we talk about it as a memory loss disorder, but actually it's more correctly thought about as a memory-making disorder. So that explains when people, and maybe you've had this experience, when your mom, she can remember the address of the first house she grew up in, or the first house when she had her first child, but she can't remember the appointment time today after you told her 7 times that it was 1 o'clock we were going to Dr. Laird's office. That short-term memory making is what's happening when at the hippocampus Alzheimer's disease has set in. So that's the main sort of cardinal feature of Alzheimer's disease. But as you can see in this graphic, Alzheimer's disease doesn't remain in that spot. It does unfortunately continue on. And as the disease kind of takes this counterclockwise trajectory, it moves past another lobe called the temporal lobe. And that lobe also houses some of our language ability, sense of smell. After the temporal lobe, it can then move on up to the frontal lobe. And if you look at the bullets highlighted here, the frontal lobe really houses our personality. It houses our emotional control. It's really the part of the brain that makes us the most human. And unfortunately, that's where Alzheimer's disease, even though it starts down here in the hippocampus, it can actually move into these other parts of the brain. And that's some of the symptoms that I know you mentioned, seeing in your mom, some of the changes in her mood, and her temper being slightly less well controlled than it had been in the past. Those sorts of emotional symptoms can be found because of trouble in the frontal lobe. The other part of the frontal lobe that we know can be a problem with our patients with Alzheimer's disease has to do with reasoning and judgment. And we talked a little earlier about your mom opening some letters and feeling free to send back donations to anyone who was really sending her requests. And that's a good example of poor judgment. And so that, unfortunately, is part of the disease as it progresses through the different parts of the brain. One of the things we'll do today is talk with your mom about her memory loss and the diagnosis. And then I think it'll be real important for us to make sure that you and your mom have enough resources to get you information that you need along the way. We talked a little bit about how this disease progresses. Well, that's the experience really of living with the disease or being a caregiver, is that things change over time. And so one of the things I've found really helpful is to have our patients and their families be connected with the Alzheimer's Association. So the Alzheimer's Association, we have a really good local chapter here. They are individuals who know all about this kind of this illness in particular, and all about the different challenges that patients can face and caregivers can need to handle. And they'd be a real good resource for you. There's a 24-hour hotline, so that at any time of the day or night, should something occur that you need some information about, you'd have someone knowledgeable about this illness who'd be able to help guide you towards your appropriate next steps. And they're also a real good resource for local programs and services that we have here that can give you some support, along with what we'll do here in the clinic to help you and your mom along the course of this illness.